following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Hey everybody, Chase Thornton here. It's time for Belly Up Fantasy Live. It is graduation season. People are, moving on to the next phases of their lives and celebrating what they've accomplished and looking forward to what they still have yet to accomplish. We're going to talk about some fantasy players on our Dynasty rosters that we think need to celebrate a graduation of some type today. We'll talk about that, and we'll touch on some of the latest news this week. We'll talk about a little bit of Aaron Rodgers because we can't get away from him lately. We'll talk about DeAndre Hopkins, all that and more coming up right now on Belly Up Fantasy Live.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees, and a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. There's the whistle. That means it's time to start things here at Belly Up Fantasy Live. How is everybody doing this morning? Good morning. Yeah, hey, like we said, graduation season. Plenty of action going on. I know that literally on our block today we've got 3 different graduation parties going on, so it'll be hard to drive around our neighborhood this morning. But hey, welcome in everybody. I am Chase Thornton coming to you as always from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar. And looking forward to talking some Dynasty football again today. With me, as per usual, Kevin Wilson. Welcome, Kevin. How we doing?
I'm doing outstanding, Chase. How about yourself?
Well, getting by. Looks like we solved some of the technical glitches. Kevin and I were having a little trouble seeing and hearing each other here in the pregame warm-ups, but looks like we've got that all taken care of. We're ready to move on and talk some football. You got anything exciting going on this weekend for the big Memorial Day weekend there, Kevin?
Well, first of all, unlike last weekend, I am off. So I got that going on. And the wife and I are currently at a resort a couple hours east of where we live. So we are taking it easy this weekend, and they got a water park here. So we're doing some lazy river and just enjoying ourselves. And, of course, got to make sure I get in on all the action here. So despite all the fun, I'm here.
There you have it. All right. Well, welcome in. It's good to see you. And yeah, I hope everybody out there has a fun and safe 3-day
That's right.
Memorial
Be
Day
safe, everybody. Be safe.
Somehow, some way up here in Northwest Wisconsin, we're actually in the middle of, and I won't say it too loud, but knock on wood, some decent weather for the weekend instead of our usual rain out fest. But, and again, we would like to remind everybody to also keep in mind why we are celebrating this weekend and
that's right.
What we're thinking about this weekend out there. But, wishing everybody a good holiday and a good Memorial Day weekend here.
That's right. People gave up their lives so we could have a 3-day weekend. So we salute all of them.
Yeah, and not just for the 3-day weekend either. But
right.
All right, well,
exactly right. For our freedoms, ability that we could sit here and do a show and say pretty much whatever we want to say. So hats off to everyone that gave their life.
There you have it. All right, yeah. Not just the 3-day weekend, but yeah, like we said, we get to sit here and talk about fake football for pay. So hey. Woohoo!
All
right.
And so to salute, we got to get started. So there it goes.
There you go.
Got some Shinerbach happening today.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I actually have to restock on the Shinerbach. I generally keep a pack in there, but it's a little bit of an early morning. I've got a wife who's a bit under the weather. I've got a 4-year-old who's thinks he's under the weather and is not. It was a late night. It was an early morning, so I've got a little bit of coffee bender here from the fine folks over at Surly Brewing Company over in the Twin Cities.
Okay.
So, yep, and they're popular up here. This is not necessarily representative of the brand as they would say on National Geographic. but it's a good one. Coffee Bender is one of my favorite ones from them, and I need it this morning. So here we go.
Okay, so we do what we have to do.
Forge ahead, onward, soldiers. All right, the big news this week. We'll start off. We'll touch on some of the news that came out from the NFL this week and the dynasty news, fantasy football news in general. But big news this week came a couple of days ago when the Arizona Cardinals released DeAndre Hopkins. This is not necessarily a divorce that came out of nowhere. That was a surprise. I think a lot of people had the Cardinals moving on from DeAndre Hopkins.
They tried to trade him. Nobody bit.
No, nobody bit. And this is a franchise that is clearly in transition right now. New coaching staff hired. General manager, the front office, there's changes there. I mean, this is a franchise that is in transition right now. We have no idea right now at the moment whether Kyler Murray will play this year, how much he'll play, how good he'll be, how good they'll let him be. So it might be the Colt McCoy show there. They might go a different direction. Nobody knows right now yet what to make of the Arizona Cardinals, but they were expected to move on from DeAndre Hopkins this offseason. Now, like you said, no trade came about. Supposedly, they were in trade talks trying to move him, and some teams couldn't take him on because of his big salary cap hit.
$30 million is not a drop in the ocean. So
that's not something you can just add on a whim. Yeah, in the NFL, most teams are run up against the cap close enough that trying to fit 30 million in means you've got to talk to a few more guys on the roster and make some changes somewhere. But despite what we heard about, they were in trade talks, now it comes out, according to Albert Breer of the Monday Morning Quarterback, he comes out and says that supposedly only Buffalo and Kansas City were anywhere near substantial talks with the Arizona Cardinals on a trade for DeAndre Hopkins, and they never really got all that serious. So they had no takers. So 2 days ago now, we get that DeAndre Hopkins is released, cut outright. It's going to be almost a $22 million cap hit this year for the Cardinals. But the positive thing for that, I saw a lot of people, well, why did they do it now? Why did they just cut him? They couldn't trade him to anybody. They couldn't get a seventh rounder back even for him, anything. The reporting right now is that they just want to be done with it. They want to be past it. They want to get it done as quick as possible, rip the Band-Aid off and move on. So letting him go now, not even as a June 1st or post-June 1st designation, means that it's a almost $22 million cap hit. Means they do save $8.9 million against the cap. Not that they're worried about that this year because they're not signing anybody to try and help anyway. But they're done with it after this year. He's off the books for 2024. They can move on from that whole thing. Second kind of odd divorce from a franchise that we've seen in DeAndre Hopkins' career. Obviously, there was the weird trade, Bill O'Brien trading him from the Texans to the Cardinals in the first place, but now this whole bit here. So, couple of things. First off, what was your initial reaction to hearing that he just got released outright and they were cutting all ties with him? And then I guess secondly, we can address where we think he'll fit. But first, what was your reaction?
Well, my initial reaction was that because I don't own any shares anywhere with DeAndre Hopkins. So my first reaction is I hope he doesn't sign anywhere where I have wide receivers currently on my fantasy team, because that's going to kick him down the ladder just a bit. And I think that a lot of people are kind of holding their collective breaths a little bit, because just like I said, wherever he signs, whoever they have as wide receivers necessarily takes a step back. And so that was my first reaction. The second one is, if I did have DeAndre Hopkins, I would be extraordinarily happy because, as you mentioned, the Cardinals aren't going anywhere. Murray's may not even play. So wherever he winds up is going to be a positive scenario for him and his fantasy owners. So if you happen to have him, you applauded that news. What was that, Thursday or Wednesday, whatever day that was that came out? And so, two different reactions. If you don't have them, you're like, please don't sign where my wide receivers currently are. And if you do have them, you're like, yay, praise all that's holy that they made that move.
Yeah, no, I think that, he's a good enough player that he can
absolutely
kind of transcend. He can transcend his situation to some extent. I mean, they've been good. They've been a tease actually down in Arizona for the last couple of years since he got there. But in general, when he's been healthy, he's been able to put together, some very good numbers for fantasy managers there. And I do have a couple of shares of him in Dynasty here. And yeah, I'm waiting to see where he lands like everybody else. Buffalo and Kansas City, two names that have come up there, two names that came up in the trade talks, and two names that have come up in like pundits and people that do what we do here as a possible match for him.
Right, and that $30 million prevented any of that discussion going forward.
Right, and
especially
now you're
with Kansas City. I've read that their cap situation is such that they could not have possibly have done that.
Right, yeah. So now they're out from underneath that. People don't have to worry necessarily about that big a cap hit. You can do some creative signing with DeAndre Hopkins. You can negotiate with him. You can sign him if you want to sign him to a 1-year deal. Throw a bunch of incentives in there or whatever, make a bunch of it signing bonus, spread that hit out for a while, whatever you want to do. That's between you and his representation now. But you don't have to, you're not guaranteed, that $30 million cap hit that was such a roadblock.
And so
since
that's out of the way, I think Kansas City is probably the best possible landing spot for him, because he had three criteria that he said. One, the quarterback. Two, the defense, which is kind of weird because he's an offensive player. And three, the management team needed to be, solid. And so, of course, they got Patrick Mahomes. Kansas City's defense is not lights out, but it's good enough. And, of course, they've got Andy Reid. So in their wide receiver room, as we've talked about before, even though they've got Patrick Mahomes, is nothing to write home about. So if he was to go to Kansas City, that would be, like you said, you're an owner of DeAndre Hopkins, you would be cheering from here to Timbuktu because of that announcement. Buffalo also, they've got the solid defense. They've got, of course, Patrick Mahomes is number one. He's number 2 or 3 right behind him. And then they've got a pretty solid management team there. So that makes sense also. Just for personal wise, I don't think I want to play up in Buffalo and get 25 feet of snow in my front yard, but that's just me. But as an organization, that makes sense for him as well.
Yeah. No, I live where there's enough snow. I don't necessarily want the fan base and the neighbors to have to come shovel me out so I can drive to work.
Right. And I lived through that, years and years ago. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So, you can have all of that. That's what I tell my mom. You can have all the snow. I don't want any of it. So it's
like if anybody out there that remembers the Wayne's World movie, what they say, I'm in Delaware. Yeah, I'm in Delaware. Buffalo has a little bit of that kind of mystique to it, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, because remember, they couldn't even play a football game because they had 25 feet of snow on the field.
Literally. Yeah, they were literally buried. Orchard Park, where the facility is located, literally had the most snow in the region last year when they were crippled by that, as they seem to be about once a year at least. But no, like you said, a couple of good fits there, I think, from a football standpoint. From a real football standpoint, Kansas City has a need for a number 1 type wide receiver.
They sure do.
They lose Juju Smith-Schuster a year after losing.
And that's nobody's idea of a number 1 receiver, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Not at this point in his career anymore. But
no.
he was their number one last year, but the guy that they've been trying, or that fantasy owners to some extent have been trying to shoehorn into their number one role, Mecole Hardman, is also gone now. Mecole Hardman signing with the Jets in this offseason. And obviously Smith-Schuster's up in New England by now. So they lose. They don't have either of those two guys left. They have a wide receiver room right now that's headlined by the oft injured and seldom available Kadarius Toney, who we don't even really know yet what he is in terms of an NFL receiver.
After all these years, we still don't know what he is.
Yeah, we've seen some real exciting, moments and flashes, and then something else is hurt and he can't play anymore. So we don't know what they have there yet, but he's in their room, and of course Marcus Valdes-Scantling is coming back. I am not. I've
said many times, cancel me some MVS. All right.
He is just the dude. He's better at football than the vast majority of humanity, which isn't saying a ton in terms of how he stacks up in the league. And then also we're waiting to see what they have in Sky Moore from last season as well. Again, some flashes, didn't see the field a ton. There's a lot of hype around it, but they also went out and drafted Rashee Rice. I mean, there's a lot of guys in that room, but not a lot of known quantities.
Right. So if you had your dynasty, rookie draft, and you took Rice, and as you said, lots of people, including us, were high on him. If he goes there, then that's going to stunt his development. It would have to.
Right. It makes sense for him to go there from a real football standpoint in terms of he would immediately lend a ton of legitimacy to that wide receiver room. He, becomes option 1B, presumably behind only Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce deserves to be the 1A wherever he is.
That's right. Till he's 45 years old, he's 1A. All right.
Yeah, right. But we've seen it before, though, that Patrick Mahomes doesn't necessarily need that big alpha guy in order to be successful. I mean, of course, he did last season.
Last year.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody thought, Tyreek Hill's gone. What's going to happen? And Patrick Mahomes just said, okay, I'll go out and continue to spread it all over the field. Anybody wearing a red jersey or a white jersey on, depending on where they're at, is fair game, and I'll throw it to whomever. And it worked all the way to the Super Bowl for them. But it does make sense there from a fit standpoint that way. And now that he's a little more affordable, like you said, it matches all of his criteria pieces. Presumably at this point, he wants to be on a successful team.
Right, because he's never had that. He's made the playoffs once in his career. Once.
He's been in Houston and Arizona. He has not seen a ton of on-field success in terms of, the team standpoint. Obviously, he's one of the better players at his position in the entire league. But Buffalo is interesting only because, from the standpoint of the rich would get richer.
Right.
Which
is what's going to happen here. Wherever he winds up, the rich are going to get richer.
Yeah.
I saw this piece about Houston saying, should we bring him back? Well, that's a conversation not even worth having. All right. So they need to put that back in the stable right out of the gate, because he's not going there. Right. He's not going to the dregs of the NFL. He's not doing that. He's going to a team that's ready and right now to compete and meets those three criteria, like I said.
Now, have you seen the rumors that New England might be interested? I'm skeptical. I'm not skeptical.
I'm real skeptical about that as well.
But I'm skeptical of the idea that it could happen. Bill O'Brien, remember now, is their new offensive coordinator.
Right.
They actually hired an offensive coordinator. And that's the guy that just traded him.
Right. You can cancel Christmas in June on that deal.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's happening either.
Maybe if he wasn't up there, but the quarterback does not meet the criteria that he's looking for. He might as well stay in Arizona if he's going to do that.
Yeah, and I put out a tweet after the news hit, and I said I listed a couple of quarterbacks. I said, well, which quarterbacks is he going to choose? Because that's essentially what he can do now. He can choose which quarterback he wants to play for or with, essentially. And I kind of did a little stock up, stock down, or stock sideways kind of thing. And I said, yeah, if
Right.
he goes to New England with Mac Jones, that's stock down for him because Mac Jones is not the dynamic passer
No,
that
I'm
he's
not
looking
quite
for.
as down on Mac Jones as a lot of people, but still,
He's not that dynamic of a.
No,
He's not the
no.
he's not the player that Hopkins is looking to play with. I think
No.
it's definitely not Josh
No.
Allen, Patrick Mahomes.
no. And if the Jets hadn't signed 700 wide receivers already, then that would be a possibility to me because that meets all his criteria. Of course, a quarterback, their defense is solid, and I guess we don't know for sure about their management just quite yet, but it seems pretty solid.
I think they seem like they're going in the right direction there under Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. But yeah, as you just mentioned, I mean, they have we already talked about McCole Hardman. They have Garrett Wilson, the reigning NFL rookie, the offensive rookie of the year, and who looks like a future star. They bring in Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb to keep Rodgers happy. They've got 13 different tight ends.
At least
right now,
that many.
Yeah.
So, and I like
still have Corey
Lazard
Davis
coming into this year, but if that was to happen, then all their wide receivers besides Wilson are now irrelevant.
Yeah, all of a sudden everybody takes a dip back. They're full enough there. I don't think they're going to spend any more money on that wide receiver room. They don't need to.
No, like when you sign 700 of them, that doesn't leave a lot of space.
Somebody's got to shake up somewhere, right?
Right. Your RV is pretty full when you hit the road with 700 wide receivers in it.
I think we're all kind of right now waiting to hear the news that he's signed with Kansas City. Are there other places he could fit? I think, from a football standpoint, ignoring his supposed, wish list here, but, he could fit in Carolina because, with their wide receiver room, he would instantly be the alpha there. But again, obviously there's issues there with how competitive we think the team may be this year. And with having a young quarterback who's not established yet, we don't know what Bryce Young is going to be in the league yet. Chicago would be a room he could walk right into and be the alpha. I know they just got DJ Moore in the whole first round pick trade, but
nobody's going to argue
Hopkins,
that DJ Moore and DeAndre Hopkins are in the same sentence with each other.
No. Darnell Mooney and DJ Moore are nice NFL players. They're not DeAndre Hopkins in terms of the explosiveness of what he can bring to an offense.
Justin Fields, I think, is getting ready to break loose. And so what about their management? They've only been there a year, so we don't know for sure about that. But, so Chicago could work.
That to me, that's an interesting thought. I'm not necessarily sure it boosts Hopkins' fantasy value a ton, but it would be an interesting spot to see him in for sure. And I think that it would go a long way towards making them a little more competitive. Right. Even though I still
it might even boost DJ Moore's fantasy value because now he'll face single coverage.
He would be facing a lot less coverage. Exactly. I think right now though, if you had to put money on it, where would you see him going right now?
If I was to put money on it, my immediate thought was, as I'm assuming it was probably the same as you, Kansas City, come on down, not knowing anything exactly about, what their financial fit is. We know he couldn't fit $30 million in there, but they don't have to. So if they get creative, Kansas City, he might be already on his way, on the road.
Right.
Because, it's a short flip from Arizona. I don't know where he lives in the off season or whatever, but he might be on his way to Kansas City as we speak.
Right. Yep. That might be how he celebrates his holiday weekend here.
Right.
Let's go ahead real quick. Let's listen to our Manscaped ad. We'll get on the other side of that break. We'll touch on some of the other kind of bigger news items from this week in the league, and then before we get to graduation day, and then have a little bit of fun here with who we think needs to take a walk down the aisle. But first, we're going to listen to our buddy Dan Mader here tell us all about our friends over at Manscaped.
Spring has sprung, and our friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped you tidy up all the nooks and crannies of your body's basement, but this year, Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using code BELLYUP20 to get 20% off and free shipping at Manscaped.com. It's time to tame your mane with the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. The sun is peeking back out, which means you'll have to show your face in the daylight again. So use the kit to make sure your scruff looks award-winning, whether you got glorious beard flow or some smooth, sleek cheeks. The kit starts off with the Beard Hedger, a waterproof cordless trimmer with a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. So no more messy drawers full of add-ons. It also comes with the titanium-coated T-blades that are tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to a single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time. The Beard Hedger is a high-tech piece of art in a travel-sized package with a long-lasting battery, universal charging, and a strong motor. So what are you waiting for? Save 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUP20 at Manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUP20 at Manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
20% off and free shipping if you get over there right now and use that promo code BELLYUP20. I mean, they're practically giving it to you. Yeah. So,
That's right. So, step up.
If you're starting to get a little shaggy, if you want to get that thing trimmed up, like I said, get over there. I've already got one. I don't need to get over there right now, but hey, for those of you out there who don't have one yet, get over there. Check out our friends over at Manscaped for all your hair needs up top and down below.
And if you're like me and don't need that exactly, but you got hair growing out your nose, they sent me one and it's fabulous.
Hey, yeah, there you go. All right. So moving on here, let's talk about some of the other news from this week. One that I found kind of, I guess it was a little bit of schadenfreude here, but Aaron Rodgers shows up, and obviously he's been participating in off-season activities here with the Jets, which is something that he hadn't done in Green Bay since the river was dug.
Yeah.
But we get this little episode here Tuesday where he comes out and he warms up with the team, and then we all see him over on the sideline talking to trainers and being kind of examined and limping a little bit slightly. According to Rodgers, it's a minor, strained calf. He tweaked it in the pre-practice warm-ups there, but I guess it doesn't look like anything too serious. But part of the fun of it for me, and obviously we never root for guys to get injured or hurt or anything like that, but just seeing the abject panic that set in and like rippled like wildfire across the Jets fandom with all of the nervous optimism that they have for this season with Rodgers coming in, to see him all of a sudden tweaked and sitting off to the side. It was a little fun. It was a little fun to watch. But is this something I mean, what are your thoughts on Rodgers in New York? Do we think that this is going to work? Was this the first of like, okay, well, here we go. Here's the wild ride that is Aaron Rodgers. What was your take on what happened with Aaron this weekend?
Well, you mentioned about how the panic set in, because my reaction was, as I saw what had happened, I read that it was a minor situation, and so I paid no more attention to it. That was my reaction, because I'm not a Jets guy or anything like that. But it was kind of funny to see how freaked out people were over that. And so, and it was interesting to see him play, show up at the OTAs. I think that's kind of an indictment of him, that he just didn't want to play with his friends over there up in Green Bay. So, but neither here nor there. But for this year, I think that it'll work. And for the Jets, it better, because seriously, if something was to happen, that whole move goes right down the toilet. And so he's been healthy. He's never had an issue. considering he is 39 years old, but he's never had an issue. So I think people considering that he's going to be the MVP player he was 3 years ago better stop that dream right here, because that's not going to happen. If he's better than he was last year, that's about what I expect out of him going into this year.
Yeah, I'm not overly high on him. I mean, obviously, you're talking about a guy who is only 2 years removed from back-to-back MVP awards. We know that he's still athletic. We know he can still throw the football. We know he's still a football savant. I mean, we know all that about Aaron Rodgers. We know that. But he had part of the talk last year was that, oh, well, all these rookie receivers, and he doesn't have the rapport with them. He can't just look at them and give him a wink and a nod like he can to Devontae Adams, and Adams knows, exactly
Well,
what.
If he showed up in OTAs, maybe that wouldn't have been a problem.
And
I'm just saying.
There is part of that's part of the point. Exactly. You're at OTAs this year, presumably because you're trying to work with the new guys on the offense that you're new to and learn things and get a rapport. Had you done that last year with the obvious football talents that it looks like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs can be now,
right?
Maybe things would have been different to begin with.
Maybe they would have.
Who knows? But at any rate, I'm not worried about him from an injury standpoint that way.
And Jets fans, take a Tylenol, whatever you need to do.
Back off and calm down.
Maybe right. Open yourself like I did. Open up your Shiner box. Take it easy, because
a little bit of nerve tonic there.
Yeah. Because that was literally my reaction when I heard about it. It's a minor scenario, and I didn't read any further.
I have him kind of like you mentioned. I think he can be better than last year. I think he can be a back end starting quarterback to start.
Them with. Talking about him being the top 5 wide receivers or quarterbacks in the AFC better take a little, stop the brakes just a little bit, because the AFC quarterback room is pretty jacked up. Jack.
If he ends up staying more than 1 year, if he ends up coming back for next season, which would be big, and it's not out of the question, as wishy-washy as he is, it's not out of the question that he is there for next year. I think everybody needs to count on this season, and next year it would be complete icing on everybody's cake in terms of fantasy-wise, in terms of the Jets themselves. But if he comes back next year, now we can maybe start to talk, because they do have a very talented team, a very talented core of offensive skill players around him. Right.
Everybody's, 1 year older, and Breece Hall, is way beyond
has that
the injury
and together.
Yeah, all that stuff. And to make this deal worth it, he better play next year for the Jets. That's the way I see it. Because those that think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, like I said, pump the brakes. All right.
Well, but as long as he can get 65% of the reps this year, and we can get a first rounder back up here in the Northwoods, I'd be happy with all of that.
Yeah, that would be good to go for Green Bay. And I think if they simply make the playoffs,
right,
that's my goal for them, because
And if you make the playoffs, you may whet his appetite a little bit to come back.
Right, exactly.
If we could do that without knowing each other,
as we've seen from the hockey world, the Florida Panthers were the number 8 seed in the Eastern Conference, and they're now in the Stanley Cup final.
Yep. You get
there, and who knows what could happen. So just make the playoffs, and then get everybody a little bit older, a little bit more mature, more experience, and next year go out there, and Buffalo is older, but they've got a lot of veterans. That's a little different over there. So maybe next year you could say that they'll be the AFC East, champions. Not this year. It's not happening this year.
No, I think for their sakes, I think they should hope, and I think they should put more stock in the idea of if he can come back for a second year. But I understand the urgency and the need to go all in this year, because you never know with him. From one injured or at least slightly injured quarterback to another, Jimmy Garoppolo, Still not cleared to come back from the foot injury, the broken foot that he sustained last season. A Jones fracture in his foot that happened last December. Remember, that is where you break the outside bone, basically. I believe it's the fifth metatarsal, they call it. And we don't have our friend from the Injured List podcast here, but supposedly, I mean,
that doesn't sound comfortable. Whatever else
it's not a good one on the outside there. I mean, when you try to plant, you put all that force that goes to the outside of the foot there. But a Jones fracture in his foot, he still has not received full clearance yet. I guess he tried rehabbing it. Rehabbing that kind of injury generally has about an 80% or so success rate, but he was not successful in trying to rehab it. They ended up needing to have surgery on it, which happened in March, and he is still not cleared. There's no timetable necessarily for his recovery, for his when he'll be able to be on the field. He's definitely not on the field right now for OTAs, and they don't necessarily know when he will be ready. Are we worried about Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it Brian Hoyer time in Las Vegas? What do we make of this, or how are you planning on moving forward here with Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, according to McDaniels, this is a direct quote, he's going through his process just like we knew he would. Nothing has happened that would surprise us based on the information that we had. So, given that, when they signed him, they knew at that time that he was going to have this surgery. They knew that. So, they went into it with their eyes wide open. And from everything that I've read about this, it's not time to bust out the worry carpet or whatever. And so I think that if everything goes according to plan, that he should be fine come September. And so and if it doesn't, Hoyer, don't put any biscuits in his basket. No, it's not happening there. So, if the Raiders going to do anything, they need Jimmy Garoppolo.
They do, I think if they don't seem worried about it, like you said, they knew coming in. They knew when he was.
That's right. Eyes wide open. It's not like that movie with Tom Cruise, eyes wide shut, whatever. Yeah. And so it was. They had their eyes open. So
they knew what they were doing when they brought him in.
They knew that, and so
And the nice thing about it is that this is not a situation where it's a guy coming in who's never worked with you before and who knows nothing about what you're doing in the building. I'm sure things are a little bit different, but McDaniel and Garoppolo have worked together before. They, in New England, they know each other. This is a guy who presumably should be able to step into the system and pick it up and have command of it fairly quickly. Same thing with Brian Hoyer, which I think is a big reason they brought him in and allowed Jarrett Stidham to sign up in Denver, is because they have two guys now out front, as aging and as not spectacular maybe as they seem to fans. These are two guys who both can run the quarterback position in McDaniel's offense. And they'll be just fine. They probably want to shovel that offense a little bit more through Josh Jacobs anyway.
Right.
And on top of that, then they're throwing to Devontae Adams and they're throwing to Jacoby Myers. So
right. So if you've got Jacobs who can put 200 yards on the field for you, But going back a couple weeks ago when you talked about the schedules, if you're talking about the Raiders, they need every offensive player because you see their first two games at Denver and at Buffalo. Yeah, that is not set up for offensive success whatsoever.
No, you're facing a couple of monster defenses off the bat, including one in your own division, and
and whatever problems Denver had was not on defense. So, and playing up in Mile High is never easy. So, as the Lakers found out, if we want to switch to NBA real quick, Lakers couldn't handle Denver, which I'm fine with that.
It did not make me cry at all. Now, what's happening in the East, on the other hand, is a very interesting situation, but that's for another time and another show.
That's right. And so, speaking of, throw this in here while I'm thinking about it. On Wednesday is the Belly Up basketball final, NBA Finals Super Show.
Yes.
And so it's going to start at 5 Central, which I cannot do. I will be there at some point during the show. And so just putting that out there now. NBA Super, not just
Super show. Not just a show.
not just a show,
Not just the final show.
super show. All right. So look forward to that on Wednesday.
Definitely jump right on that. Finals are going to start on Thursday, regardless of who's playing them for the East. But we're going to be previewing all that. Yep, like you said, right here on Belly Up Fantasy Sports and Belly Up Sports. So moving on now from Garoppolo, I'm not worried about it.
Not worried about him.
I've got Garoppolo ranked. He'll be a mid-tier quarterback anyway. He's not a top 12 option for me at the moment.
No,
but, to his
he never was. He never was that.
To his former team, Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy, obviously the elbow injury that happened in the playoff game and ended that magical run for them and precipitated not just a lot of change in their quarterback room or effort in their quarterback room in San Francisco, but forced rule changes in the league because of what I think, regardless of what the league says or however anybody wants to spin it, I think we all can agree that as a direct result of what happened in that playoff game with the 49ers having to go to at one point Christian McCaffrey taking direct snaps and then putting back in an clearly injured and limited Brock Purdy just to receive snaps. There now will be that third emergency quarterback who can dress on game day for you.
And off the cuff, it's called the Brock Purdy rule. So
right.
And so I've read that people have some problems with it. I don't know why you would.
No.
And it's happened, how many times? What are we at? Super Bowl, what is it, 60 or so?
Yeah, 50, 57, something like 58.
Okay, so, and this is the first time that's ever happened. So, it's like sighting of a comet. You see it and you don't see it again until, you're 89 years old or whatever. So.
Right. Yeah, it's not something that's going to come into play a ton, but it's something that they used to. I remember growing up, you always heard about the third they always told you who was listed as the third emergency quarterback for the day kind of thing. And obviously some teams have guys who are playing wide receiver who used to be quarterbacks, or tight end who used to be quarterbacks, or whatever, kickers who took snaps and punters, that kind of thing.
The Denver Broncos a few years ago, most famously.
Right. A lot of teams have guys like that they can use in like if it came down to absolute emergency, but not everybody. But I grew up knowing about the third emergency quarterback, and then they took that away. Well, now they're bringing it back, but it's all because of Brock Purdy and what happened in that playoff game. Well, he's got, he had some swelling in that elbow that pushed his UCL surgery back to March. But he is scheduled to begin throwing as soon as this week here. Yep. And they're thinking he could possibly be ready to be in uniform for the start of the season. Now, whether he's ready to be the starter or not. And they do have, again, still the guy they traded up for in the draft, Trey Lance, in-house and coming off an injury of his own. But they also did bring in then another former first-round draft pick in Sam Darnold, who has starting experience in this league.
And so for fantasy, you don't want anything to do with any of those guys. Just to throw that out there until we get some clarity, exactly what's going on there.
I don't want to be relying on any of those guys this season right now at the moment. But what do you think happens with the 49ers quarterback situation this season? Who do you think we see behind center for them week one? Who do you think is their long-term starting quarterback for the season? And how do you think this shakes out in the future? They keep talking about Trey Lance. They keep talking him up. But we have not seen it from him yet.
No.
And we saw what Brock Purdy was able to do last season. We think we know what Sam Darnold's capable of, but we've there have been good reports out of what he's been doing since they brought him in. And a lot of people saying they wouldn't be surprised if Purdy's not ready to go, that Darnold is the week 1 starter. What do you see happening with this 49er quarterback?
Well, if you're the 49ers, you got to hope that both answers to that question are Trey Lance. He's the week 1 starter, and he's the long-term answer to your question, because they traded up to get him, and so they spent some capital there. These other 2 guys, you got them. When you check the change in your pocket, and you gave and that's how you got them. So you don't have nearly as much invested in either one of those guys, and so you got to hope Trey Lance is something. And I would think that Brock Purdy would be right in the running for that job if he wasn't coming off this injury. And I think that it's talking about, I think he's allowed to throw some next week. So he thinks. That's what Shanahan said. So there's nothing definitive on this. And it's a 12-week rehab. He had it in March. So he's not going to be doing anything till August, maybe. So we're not going to know what's going on with that. So if Darnold is their starter, then, all these 49er fans, which, of course, that'd be fine with me. But,
yeah, well,
their season's going to start to unravel before it even starts.
Yeah, both our teams have a little bit of San Francisco history there. That it wouldn't break my heart to see them not having success with their quarterback position. But the way I look at it, you make a point that I've heard a lot of other people make too, about the investment that they have in Trey Lance because they traded up for him, because there's the expectations that come with being that high a draft pick. From a fantasy standpoint, it would be awesome if he could blossom and become anything. If he could become,
right.
even if he could give us what Justin Fields even is giving us, because we know he's athletic as all get out. And running quarterbacks in fantasy, we love them in fantasy.
Right. Absolutely.
But, listen, that's okay. The way I see it, and I try to look at it a little bit from a business standpoint as well, that's a sunk cost. That cost is there whether you get anything or not. You have Brock Purdy, on the other hand, who you barely put anything into, doesn't and did not cost you anything. But if you end up getting what you wanted out of Trey Lance from Brock Purdy, the equation.
You're happy with that, just like last year when he threw 2 touchdown passes every single game until he got to the playoffs, and then he threw 3.
You were going to spend 9 on Trey Lance and 1 on Brock Purdy for 10 total at the quarterback position, right? If you get 10 out of that equation from the standpoint of their output and the results, what does it matter if most of the 10 came from the guy that you're paying 9 to? I mean, I get it. We all want the high paid guys to be the guys who do it for us. But your quarterback room was already going to be paid what it was going to be paid. And we all know that success relies on the quarterback position is just about the benchmark for whether or not you could be successful in an NFL team.
Right.
Who do you care is taking those snaps between Trey Lance and Brock Purdy, as long as whoever it is giving you that success. So now, okay, great. Maybe Trey Lance doesn't work out for you. Maybe it is Brock Purdy. From everything we saw from him last year, that's great because he's a lot cheaper for a while. He's on a rookie quarterback of Mr. Irrelevant rather than a first-round talent.
You just have to be worried a little bit. Is that a flash in the pan scenario? You know what I'm saying? So
the way he was able to sustain that success, though,
right? And it wasn't for like a game or two. It was for 5 games. Coming down to the regular season and a couple playoff games.
Of the season essentially, and the playoffs until he got hurt, they looked fine, and we know
they look better than
Kyle Shanahan's system.
Unfortunately for us Seahawks fans,
right? He can work in that system, I think, and honestly, we've heard good things about Sam Darnold in that system. So now, going forward, maybe if Lance can show something, maybe you've got, I mean,
Yeah.
if you have 3 quarterbacks that can play in your system right now on staff, that's a great first world problem to have. So
Right. And so
honestly,
that's
from
why
my
I think that
standpoint, I think it's Purdy.
they're going to show up. They're going to Trey Lance, right? Because
Right.
early in camp they have to, because Purdy's not going to be ready.
No.
And so let's say Purdy and him are 1 and 1A. They're the exact. They have this level of success. So you put Trey Lance out there, he kills and he does everything. And so now you've got Brock Purdy, who's everything that you thought he might be. So now you've got somebody that you can use as a trade chip, and you're going to trade Trey Lance because of the obligation to him and everything else. You'll get more for him if he goes out and kills.
Right.
So that's what I think that would be the best thing for the 49ers. The best thing for the rest of us would be, for both quarterbacks to get just leveled. And
if
so,
from the 49ers standpoint, if you can get Trey Lance to show something,
right, that would be a
probably
positive.
Still the most exciting prospect if you can get somebody to bite on that.
Right. And if he goes out week 1 and throws 2 touchdown passes, you're on to the races after that.
And honestly, in fantasy, in Dynasty, that's what I would be hoping for as well, because I'm
right. A lot of people own Trey Lance, of course. They spent a high draft pick to get him, so you're hoping he goes out. I don't have him anywhere, so
no, I don't either, and I'm not big on him. I honestly think that Purdy is probably the better quarterback for what they're looking for and what they need, and again, like I said,
and Brock Purdy doesn't need as much, ego massaging. Let's say
doesn't look like it.
Doesn't look like he's a humble guy. He'll do whatever it is, and maybe Trey Lance is that way too, but it doesn't seem that way.
Purdy's got a better hairline too than Trey.
Oh yeah,
seen these pictures of Trey Lance where he doesn't have the hat on, and it looks like he looks like George Jefferson, which is not back for some of our
right. So you want to throw up a picture of George Jefferson, you'll see that that's not necessarily a good thing.
Google that on the Google machine, kids.
That's right.
All right. Real quick here, last one we'll talk about before we get to our graduation segment here. Javonte Williams on field for Thursday's OTA activities in Denver. Speaking of Denver, tore his ACL, tore his LCL, had other damage in that knee. I mean, those weren't the only things that happened.
Right.
But he looks like he's
really the most majorly injured guy that we could possibly talk about.
But he looks like he could be ready for the start of the season now. Now they went out and they signed Samaje Perine, former backup for the Bengals, which we know filled in really, really well for Joe Mixon.
Which I like him a lot. So if he has to start, he's fine.
I like Perine because now obviously they bring in the new coach in Denver, and in that system, I like what Perine's skill set. I like how that meshes together with what they're trying to, I think they're going to try to do in that offense. Remember what Alvin Kamara catches the biggest reason Alvin Kamara has been a successful fantasy player and a valuable fantasy asset is that he catches the ball and can run the ball. Samaje Perine was a pass catching back in Cincinnati. Right. And I think that, coming now into Denver, he's set up well for success there for what he brings to the table. But Javonte Williams, a guy that I was maybe the only guy in the industry down on him last year going into the season, but we've all been the industry has been trying to shoehorn him into this like feature back. He's fun as all hell to watch, and I've never said anything different. He's fun to watch. He runs hard. He's a human highlight reel. But I'm still not sure where we're all getting this idea that he just is automatically, because he's fun to watch in bursts, why we all assume that he can be an every down 300 plus touch a year back when he's never been that in his football career, going back to North Carolina when he shared reps with Michael Carter, who is not a bad running back in his own right up in New York. Javonte Williams, and we can talk about I will talk about him here in the graduation segment coming up here in 2 seconds.
Okay.
But Javonte Williams looks like he could be ready for this season. Are you excited about that? Encouraged by that? And what do you think? What are your thoughts on having Williams on your roster?
To be quite honest, I'm rather surprised that they're saying that he's going to be ready for training camp.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought there was zero chance of that happening. And so, but that's what Sean Payton said. And but other guys like Terrell Davis, the running back for Denver Broncos, who knows something about running the football, has said, "Hey, don't rush this guy."
Yeah.
And so, when I hear something like that, that gives me a pause. But Sean Payton has earned also, he's Sean Payton.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to know for
talking about a
sure
Super
what.
Bowl winning coach, and we're talking about a guy who knows what he's ostensibly
Right.
doing.
He's not somebody that just, fell out of the tree and, and here I am. But so I don't have any shares of Javonte Williams anywhere. And so if I did, I would still be, I don't even know if I'd be optimistic at this point until he actually does get on the field.
Right.
If you do have him, you put him on, he's not ready, you put him on IR and then see what happens. But I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope for that this year. Denver's offense needs all the help they can get, though. So if he was to play, I think that would be a decent combination between him and Samaje Perine.
I think it could be a good combination. I'm just not overly excited about either of them. Listen again. I will say this. I've been beating this drum since, like I said, last preseason. I like Javonte Williams as a player. I'm sure he's a good person and his mother loves him. He's fun to watch. I'm just not as convinced as everybody else that all of a sudden we've got this amazing superstar fantasy asset who can handle the 300 plus touches a season like Austin Eckler. Okay. I'm not convinced that we've got Nick Chubb on our hands here. I'm just not until and unless we see it. And especially coming off this crazy devastating injury where he shredded everything in his
everything that could be shredded,
shin bone and his quad. Yeah. Like just everything disappeared. I'm not ready to sign off on that. I'm not overly excited about having either of them this season, Williams or Perine, in terms of,
Well, I would, because I've got Perine on one of my teams, so I think his stock went up going over there.
I think,
and so if Javonte Williams doesn't play at all, then okay, because I got Samaje Perine, I'm fine with that. But so, and it says that he's already on the field with a knee brace, so we just have to wait and see what happens with him. But until, like you said, and everybody's talking about how put together this guy is, how he's such a strong man and whatever else.
But,
and so go out there, get healthy, show us, and then maybe next year you and I will be eating our words about this.
I won't quite go that far, but I was going to say I would love nothing more than to be proven wrong on Javonte Williams. And I listen, I hope the guy has a successful season, successful career. I hope nothing but the best for him. And I do love to watch him run the football. It's fun. I don't know where we all got this collective, mass hysteria that he was going to be the next revelatory running back in football and be the bell cow, the be all end all there, when he's never shown that in his football life that he is that guy yet.
Yeah.
Maybe he's nothing more than a guy who's a timeshare back.
Right. And I don't get what people are saying about that, because Denver last year coming into the season did not approach that as he was going to be the bell cow back.
No.
So
I took a lot of ribbon for Melvin Gordon for talking about Melvin Gordon last year.
I liked Melvin Gordon last year. Of course, that
They liked him the year before.
they buried me right alongside of him. But but going into the season, you had every reason to like him.
Their season went off the rails early in the season. If they were competitive, if they still had Javonte Williams available, if they weren't losing games hand over fist, and if they had any kind of offensive identity there, thank you, Nathaniel Hackett. So
hopefully Russell Wilson doesn't embarrass us Wilsons all season long again this year.
Right, but no, I'm cautiously optimistic about the idea that Javonte Williams plays earlier than we thought he would, but I'm not going to be as big on him as everybody else has been and probably will be, and I will not be spending probably the capital that is needed to get him on my rosters. So I'm not going to be worried about that much. If you've got him in Dynasty, he's one that I would recommend for a graduation here. But before we get to graduation, let's listen to our second ad right here from SeatGeek. And we get back on the other side real quick. We're going to run through some graduation scenarios. Who do we think will be moving on or should be moving on from your dynasty rosters or from their teams in the NFL in general? So we'll talk about that here on the other side of the spot.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan from No Credentials Required to talk to you about one of our newest partners at Belly Up Sports, SeatGeek. Yeah, live sports is great on television, but the feeling of being at the arena is a priceless experience. That's why our friends at SeatGeek are there to help you find the best tickets at the best prices. Not only can you get tickets to sporting events, but you can also get tickets to concerts, comedy shows, musicals, and more. Search for your desired event now at SeatGeek.com, enter promo code BellyUpSports at checkout, and you save $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek. Life's an event. We have the tickets.
All right. Yep. Get over there to SeatGeek, use that, and hey, get in on the action. Any kind of shows or entertainment that you're looking for tickets for, get on over there to SeatGeek. They can help you out with that. Now, like we say, it's graduation season. People are moving on.
And congratulations to everyone that's graduating, whether it's high school, college, beauty school, whatever it might be.
Very much so.
Congratulations to you all.
My youngest, my second youngest, but he started school this season. So my youngest school age kid right now, he finished pre-K, 4K this season.
Oh, cool.
And he's excited about that. But we were talking about some graduation type things with him, and he was wondering about his friends at school. He goes to a private school, and it's pre-K through 8th grade. And he was talking, they're talking about graduation there too. I'm like, well, that's kind of like just for fun graduation. Graduating, quote unquote, from 8th grade into high school is a little different than your actual graduation from high school. I said, they call it graduation when you guys leave preschool and go to elementary school and that. But
I don't know about you, but I never had any of that.
No, right. Yeah. It wasn't graduation.
No graduation.
It was going from 6th to 7th grade.
No, there was none of that going on. It's like, get out.
Yeah.
Move on.
Right. You're just moving on. Graduation is reserved for high school and like you said, whatever secondary education you're dealing with, whether you're going to trade school or whether you're going to college or whatever. But anyway, it is graduation season here. And so what I thought we could do is we could look at some graduation scenarios, fantasy football wise, and in the NFL. So who is someone that you think deserves a graduation here this season? And this can be from the standpoint of either who needs to graduate from dynasty rosters and move on and be done. Who do you need to be done with? And let that person go into the world and make their own way. Or who do we wish would graduate from football and just be done and out of our hair? Out
of our collective lives?
Yeah, so I'll give you the first shot here. Who are you nominating for graduation?
The guy I'm going to nominate for graduation that needs to move on to, a better life, so to say. Okay, that would be Myles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins. And so, so the reason why I say that is because, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how I'm big on Shane. Okay, I'm still struggling to say that name. But anyway, they've got 3 guys that are ahead. Miles Gaskin is the guy that won me a couple of games a few years back, but that's a few years back. And so now he's going to be the number 4 running back there. And that's all there is to it. And I don't need a number 4 running back taking space up on my dynasty roster. And so he is my first guy that needs to go. And people seem to listen. He's at 18% owned. So people are showing him the door, and the other 18% need to follow suit.
Yeah, Miles Gaskin is a guy, man. A couple of years ago, he was a league winner in some cases.
He was
I
had him.
Absolute revelation.
He was.
And he's been successful.
He
not
has
just
been
a successful fantasy asset. This guy has been a good running back in the league. He's almost a poster boy for the new attitude about running backs. Then we say new, but it's not necessarily, this isn't cutting edge, pop culture here. The new attitude in the NFL and in fantasy towards the running back position in terms of it being an interchangeable part.
Right.
This guy that won people leagues a couple of years ago and looked like he could be the guy in Miami for a while, and then they just keep bringing in different guys and new guys,
different gadgets, and he only played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. He only showed up in the score sheet 2 times. Right. RB60. Come on now.
Yeah, no,
I don't need an RB60 on my fantasy team.
That's a great name to bring up. I agree with that completely. Yeah, Miles Gaskin. Let's we're going to nominate you and hope that you can graduate onto greener pastures.
Right. Hopefully, you got some beauty school or something in your background that you can fall back on, and so something you can fall back on later. In life.
Plan B.
Plan B. Hopefully, he has one.
There you go. All right. Well, first name I'll throw out there for graduation. This is a guy that I think we need to let loose. We need to turn him loose from your dynasty rosters. This guy needs to graduate. You need to be willing to let him move on. Dalvin Cook, running back from the Minnesota Vikings. Now, it looks like the Minnesota Vikings are ready to let him go into the world on his own and then seek his own fortune. It's a guy that we know has been a fantasy superstar.
He's been a fantasy superstar until the playoffs come, and then he's hurt.
Right, and then he's hurt
every year. I've had him a couple years. Didn't have him this last year, but I had him in redraft a couple of times, and I wouldn't do that again.
I've got him on one of my dynasty teams, and it's unfortunate because it's a 16-team league, so it's a league where
16 team. That's a little different.
Yeah.
Who are you going to drop him for?
Right, that's the thing. Is I don't want to drop him. I'd like to try to move him, but I'm still competitive in that league right now. For at least this season, I am. So I'm kind of caught between: do I move on from him? You want to be early rather than late on guys. It might already be late to try and move on from Dalvin Cook and get anything of value for him, or do I risk it? Do I hold on to him?
Do you run him until run him to the ground? That would probably be my answer.
Be in the 16-team league. It's like, I'm kind of in a rock and a hard place here. But he is a guy that I would like to move on from. I don't want to have to worry about it. I think that the writing is on the wall. They haven't released him yet, but as we saw this week with DeAndre Hopkins, anything is possible. It would not be the biggest earth-shattering shock to see Dalvin Cook's name on the waiver wire, the NFL wire here coming up, in the next month or so, or after June 1st. So Dalvin Cook is a guy who I think we need to allow to graduate. If you've got him on a dynasty roster, I would be looking to move him, unless, like I said, you are in a deep league and you think you can still be competitive this season. Otherwise, I am wanting to get out from underneath Dalvin Cook on dynasty rosters and move on.
Especially if he breaks it at like the first 2-3 games.
No, if he has a hot week or two in the game, ship him. Take advantage of those headlines and get rid of him. My next name, I'll take another turn here, and then we'll turn it back over to you again. My name this is somebody who won't shock everybody if they've been watching the show for any length of time and paid attention to me much. Devontae Parker, I would like to see him just graduate, period, from the
Okay.
NFL. It is time to let go of thinking that Devontae Parker is somehow a usable and viable fantasy asset. He's not a viable fantasy asset. He's not necessarily
He's
any
not
help on
viable.
the
Let's
NFL
leave it
roster.
at that.
No, I mean, good for you for signing several NFL contracts and for
Hopefully you bank some of that.
you're taller and better at football than I am. But Devontae Parker, I am so done worrying about you, thinking about you, being in on you, thinking that you're anything else. Devontae Parker needs to graduate because if he doesn't, I mean, I might be talking to the school guidance counselor and changing some of his grades just to make sure we can get him out of here. I'm done with Devontae Parker. Who's your next name here up for
Okay, so
graduation day?
I'm going running back heavy on the players that need to go out the pasture. So my next guy is Trey Sermon of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm a little confused because I was going through, my dynasty lineup, and some of the, my league mates. He's at 28% owned. And I don't understand that. He had exactly 2 carries a year ago, 2, all of last year. And so now they signed Penny. They got Swift. So what in the world do you need Trey Sermon to do? He's not going to do it. So just send him packing.
And see, this is, I know the running back position is not the quarterback position, both in terms of importance in the NFL and in terms of how they're handled business-wise. But the 49ers, they brought in Trey Sermon with I think a third-round pick. So a fairly high draft pick in terms of, all things considered. He's top half of the draft. The same year that they had Eli Mitchell, who was a 5th or 6th round pick. But just between the two of them, Mitchell was the one who worked out. He was the one who not only was he available for you, but he plays professional football. He's a running back in the NFL. He's a legitimate starter. He's a legitimate asset in the NFL. Trey Sermon, just for whatever reason, has not worked out as such yet. But they didn't hang on to Trey Sermon and cling to him for dear life just because they had spent a little more draft capital on him than they had on Eli Mitchell. And it worked out, and it was the right move. And again, so I like I said, I take that back to the Purdy Lance situation. If Purdy's the better quarterback for what you do and in the NFL, I don't care that you traded for Trey Lance. That cost was sunk no matter what you did with it. It's spent, it's gone. If Trey Lance becomes a Hall of Famer or if Trey Lance becomes Jamarcus Russell, that cost is spent. If you get the production you wanted out of Trey Lance from Brock Purdy, hey, great. You hit on a lottery ticket, and it softens the blow of what happened with the Trey Lance situation. But Trey Sermon, a guy that, comes from a highly, obviously a highly successful and highly touted university setting, coming from Ohio State. We all had high hopes for him and thought he was going to be good, but he just has not worked out. I agree.
It's not worked out, and it's not going to work.
No, I agree. Yeah, he's a guy that I am completely willing to let walk across the stage. Grab that diploma and run, dude, because I don't need you around the halls of my facility anymore.
That's right.
So next name I'm going to put out there, and again, like I said, I want to be early rather than late necessarily on moving on from guys and letting guys go. Here's a guy, Kyler Murray is a guy that I do not want to have to deal with on any of my fantasy rosters. I am willing to let him graduate and move on from my team. If I can get anything kind of value back for him, I realize that you probably invested in him and in Dynasty. And if you're in Superflex format, I get why you maybe are a little more hesitant to move on. But listen, we already knew he was smaller stature and had some strikes against him in terms of, NFL success. He's in Arizona, which is another strike against any sort of NFL success ever. But then also now we see that he's injured. We don't know how healthy he can be. There have been questions about his. Obviously, we saw it with his contract situation. There's questions about his commitment and or ability to or desire, maybe is a better word for it, to learn and properly study an NFL offense. There are so many questions right now around Kyler Murray that I do not want to be banking my dynasty team's future on him at the quarterback position. So Kyler Murray, pomp and circumstance, walk down the aisle, switch your tassel, and move on from my area. What say you on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, though, as you mentioned, if you did have him, you're not getting anything for him.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be your issue there. And so I don't know if somebody came and said, "Hey, I'll trade you a 4th round pick." No, I'm not doing that.
No, you obviously need to get something back from him. And I kind of feel the same way about Dalvin Cook, but you may be in that situation right now where if you do want to move on from one of those kind of guys like Dalvin Cook, like Kyler Murray, maybe you can use their name to help you make a splash move that you otherwise couldn't have made before. Maybe you can trade your lower half of round 1 pick up into a top half of round 1 pick. Maybe you can turn your 1-9, your pick 1-9 into a 1-3 with Kyler attached to it and take CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, maybe take your next shot at the quarterback position. Same way with Dalvin Cook. Maybe you can turn your 1-12 into the 1-5 and get Jahmyr Gibbs or somebody.
It's interesting you mentioned 1-9 because the other dynasty, that's my pick, 1-9 in the rookie draft, and I would not trade my 1-9 pick for Kyler Murray. And it's that.
No, I would not either.
Zero chance of that happening.
But if I could hook Kyler Murray to my 1-9 and get the 1-3 or 4 out of it, I think I would take that right. I honestly do think I would take that right now. I know that Kyler Murray is really, really athletic. I know that he's got that running quarterback capability that we've seen. But even if he does play this year,
too many butts with him.
Even if he does play this year, he's not going to be throwing to DeAndre Hopkins. He can't just say F it, Nook's down there somewhere like he was. All the jokes and the memes that we've seen. So what are you going to get out of him realistically this year and going forward? Does anybody trust Arizona to actually get things straightened out and be a
hopefully not
football franchise? I don't.
No, I don't either.
I am ready to move.
And they're in my team's division, so I'm all good with Arizona falling completely apart.
There will be tears, there will be hugs, and everything else in the crowd afterwards. But I am ready to go have some potato salad and drop a card off at Kyler's party and move on. Let him graduate. Do you have another name that you're ready that you want to see graduate, either from the situation they're in or from your roster?
From my roster, from Dynasty, and guy I'm talking about is JaMychal Hasty from Jacksonville Jaguars. And he was the number 2 running back over there, and unfortunately for him, they took Tank Bigsby. Yeah, right.
Yep.
Bigsby. I forgot the G. I'm sorry. Tank Bigsby. All right, and like I said, anybody's named Tank, you got to give him credit right out of the gate. So once again, he's going to be the number 3 running back over there, and so it says, well, he's going to be on special teams, which means nothing in fantasy whatsoever. So, and he's at 35% owned. Flip him, get rid of, send him packing, like you said. Here's your graduation.
Right. He's in a rough spot there. He's in a deeper running back room. I mean, Travis Etienne comes back from the injury, looked great last year. Looks like a guy going forward. Etienne's somebody that I would like to see on my dynasty rosters.
Absolutely.
They draft Tank Bigsby, as you said, so now they've got a guy that can kind of fill that same role. But then they also bring in Dearness Johnson, a guy who had some some hype behind him as a backup in Cleveland. Talk about a guy that can't kind of catch a break. Dearness Johnson going from being behind Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt to now going to Jacksonville, thinking he might be a number 2, and then now he's behind not only Travis Etienne,
so he's
probably
number
behind
3.
Bigsby, but you've got Michael Hasty there as well.
So he's not even a 3.
Yeah.
So, as we said, number 4 running backs have no place anywhere at any time on any fantasy roster.
Right. Yeah. Michael Hasty, a guy. Yeah, I would definitely be willing to allow him to walk across stage, shake the principal's hand, and move on, Michael, because we're done with you.
Okay. So on a happier note, guys that we're ready to bring up on the stage because they're graduating to bigger and better things.
There we go.
And
let's hear one from you.
Yeah, my first guy is your guy. Anybody that has Jordan Love has to be absolutely ecstatic, because I've had him. He's been on my on my backup list, not even on the roster.
Squad,
Taxi squad now, and so if he's even an average quarterback,
right?
He's got tremendous upside. And he's going to, it's like adding a quarterback without having to make a move. And he's got all the offensive weapons that can make him a success. So I'm really excited to see what Jordan Love does up there in Green Bay. And so he's set up for success, I think, a lot this year.
I like that they've surrounded him with young guys that he can grow with, that seem explosive, that seem to complement each other. I like how Jaden Reed fits into an offensive set.
That's right, because they even drafted weapons that more than they already had.
Two young tight ends, including Luke Musgrave, who may be the most athletic prospect in the tight end class this season, coming off the injury, but again, a good young weapon he can grow with. I really like how those pieces fit together with Watson on the outside. Obviously, big, tall, deep threat, red zone threat, home run type threat. Romeo Doubs, who looks like he can be a solid outside, kind of do everything receiver for you. Jalen Reed, who can fit on the inside here now and play out of the slot, opposite of whomever wins that tight end spot between Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, Josiah DeGuara. I really like how those pieces fit together. They still have Aaron Jones. They still have A.J. Dillon in the background.
That's right. So nice, they've got it all. They've got it all in place. So all Jordan Love has to do is just don't screw up.
Right. We may not see it come to full fruition this season.
No, he's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, of course.
Even if Jordan Love can turn into a top half of the league quarterback.
Right. And if you're in a 2-quarterback league, you're set now.
Oh, big time. He's a guy I'm excited too. I had Rodgers on one dynasty roster in the same situation that I also had Jordan Love and Deshaun Watson. It's a 2-quarterback league, but I had Deshaun Watson, who I knew was going to be coming eventually, and Jordan Love. I was able to move on from Aaron Rodgers. I was able to get a guy's entire 2025 draft for Aaron Rodgers and keep Jordan Love and still have Deshaun Watson. So I was able to add to my future coffers, get out from under Rodgers while he's still a hot commodity.
You might have the police coming to your door, because that's just the thievery right there.
I was thrilled with it. I was very, very happy to be able to get rid of that. But Love is a guy. Yeah, even if he can be a top half, he doesn't have to be
right. If he's in the top 15, you're good.
Boom. And especially, like you said, if he's your number 2 guy in a super flex format,
right? He's my number 3, so I'm really set.
He's a guy. Yes, not just because I'm a Packer fan, but because I do have a couple of shares of him in Dynasty.
Right. Just look at the situation. Yeah. So if I was, and I'm not a Packer fan, unfortunate for you, I guess. But anyway, I would be very excited about what's getting ready to happen. And so the weapons are there, everything's in place. So Jordan Love, just go out, kill it, and then everybody will forget Aaron Rodgers even exists.
A guy kind of along the same lines there, and I brought up his teammate in a different graduation context, but Alexander Madison is a guy that's kind of in that same boat where it's his time. I think it's his time to ascend. It's his time to show us what he's made of, and he can graduate and be a step up now from what he has been. I think that this is the year for him to show that he's a starting running back in the league, for him to take those reins. It would really help that if the Vikings would move on from Dalvin Cook, but Alexander Madison does look like he's going to get more of a chance to graduate than another guy who last year would have been on this list for me, in Khalil Herbert, across the division there in Chicago. Just when it looked like Khalil Herbert was ready to graduate and take that next step, they let David Montgomery go, but they bring in Deontay Foreman. They also draft Rashawn Johnson. So it looks like Khalil Herbert might be stuck, maybe retaking this semester rather than
it's one of those where they looked at your record and found out that you failed phys ed when you were a freshman.
Right, or for whatever reason you need one more half credit of life science or shop class or whatever. But Alexander Madison, a guy who I think he's looks poised to take the next step. He's a guy that on fantasy rosters I would much rather have him than his teammate Cook right now in a dynasty format, because I think that Madison has more value here over the next 2-3 years than Cook will eventually end up having. So that's a guy that I would like to see move on. Let's get one more name here.
Okay, one more name. Okay, so the name I'm going to come up with is because we talked about DeAndre Hopkins earlier, and so the name that needs to step up would be none other than Greg Dortch of the Arizona Cardinals, who is now the de facto number 2 wide receiver in that room. And he's done some things, I'm not saying he needs to step up big. He doesn't have the quarterback to step up big. But he does now have, like I said, the number 2 wide receiver spot over there. He should get that. So I guess you could maybe Rondale Moore. Somebody might argue might be the
Rondale Moore.
Rondale
Moore was going to be my last word here. Yep.
Okay, so he might be the number 2, but he's he can battle that guy, Rondale Moore, for that second wide receiver spot, and he needs to step up. And if he doesn't, then you just sit down over there. The graduation stage is not for you. And so Greg Dortch is my guy who needs to step up, finish that shop class, and get up there on the graduation stage.
What an interesting situation right now. I mean, that receiver core, the entire receiving core in general in Arizona right now. I mean, obviously Hopkins is gone. AJ Green is now gone and retired. So we're talking about a couple of graduation levels here. We're talking about Hollywood Brown stepping up finally into that bona fide, unquestioned number 1 slot. Right? He can be their unquestioned number 1 receiver. Like you talked about there, Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch, both of them have an opportunity to step up and be a top 2 guy on that team in terms of that. But you've also got at tight end Zach Ertz, who has been a top level, top 8, top 5 type tight end in his career. And they also have Trey McBride, who is one of the guys I would love to see on this and put on this list and see take that next step. The only problem with every single one of those scenarios and names is that somebody has to throw them the football, and it looks increasingly like that someone might be Colt McCoy, at least to start this season.
Right.
And the situation.
Nobody wants to attach their fantasy success to Colt McCoy.
No,
nobody.
Again, sure, he's a great guy. His mother loves him and everything else, but he's not what I want to be putting my hopes and dreams for the future on in fantasy. But yeah, interesting situation there in Arizona. but there is definitely room for somebody there to
Right.
graduate, take that
And-
next step, and move on to bigger and better things than
And
the high school
Dortch
shenanigans
might
that
be
we've
a
seen
guy
there.
who's available, maybe not. But
He's a guy that I was able to get on the waiver wire in a couple of dynasty leagues last season.
so he's a guy that might be he'd be more available than I would assume than Moore would be. And so that's a guy that you need to, now that Hopkins has moved on, he's a guy that you can get possibly. That was.
Stay with us, sir, Kevin. Stay with us.
I'm trying to stay.
There
Hang
you
on
go.
a second.
Yeah, let the Shiner Bot take care of it there.
Okay, so anyway, Dortch, check it out if he's available, get him, and then if it doesn't happen, like I said, he needs to go sit down because he's not going to graduate.
He was a surprise last season in how much he could help you out. And then if he takes the bull by the horns here and takes advantage of this of Hopkins now and Green both being gone, he's a guy that definitely could step up and be a much more valuable fantasy asset than you thought he was going to be, especially coming into last season. All right. Let's take a look at real quick here. We're going to move on. We'll be done with the day here, but we're going to look at what you have going on here. Kevin, where can we find you? What do you have coming down the pipeline here? And what can we expect from you from this week?
Okay, so Vince and I will be having our fantasy baseball show tonight at 7:00, and so definitely want to check into that. We're 2 months into the season basically, and so. Players are pretty much what we thought they would be at this point. So you can make judgments on whom to pick up, whom to drop, and stuff like that. So we'll be talking about that tonight at 7. And as I mentioned, the NBA Finals Basketball Super Show will be on Wednesday. And so you definitely want to check that out. And so I can't speak exactly what my article is going to be this week because, like I said, I am on vacation at this moment. So that'll happen when it happens. You'll know it. But
all right.
Get over there to the Belly Up Fantasy website. There are all kinds of articles over there, and we're dropping them. They're coming fast and furious. So get over there and check it out.
There you go. And I'm gonna second that. As always, you can find me on Twitter at STTChase FFB. I will be giving my thoughts on everything that happens, like the DeAndre Hopkins situation, like whatever falls out and happens with the rest of the people we talked about today. Articles, everything else coming out there, bellyupfantasysports.com. Check it out for all your fantasy baseball needs, not just football right now. Baseball, like you said, is in
baseball is blowing the doors off of the Belly Up Fantasy website. Right. So definitely get over there and check that out.
Yeah, everything is shaking out just about perfect for me this week. I came up short again last week. Fantasy baseball has been a rough ride for me, but my team keeps scoring points. It's just that everybody keeps scoring points against me. Right now, I'm up. I am up over 200 points right now coming into today. So if this doesn't turn out to be a win, I may just fold the whole entire.
Well, I don't want to get too big on my happy horse, but I'm playing Vince this week, and I am taking him down back behind the woodshed.
I am facing the athletic Asian who was a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago here.
That's right.
I am I'm taking him out behind the woodshed right now. But if everything shakes out and if everything holds the way it is right now, I could jump from 9th in our 10-team league up to 5th and be only a game behind, moving into a playoff spot there. I know it's early to talk about that, but that's what I'm looking at.
And we talk about Vince. He was outside the playoffs for a long time, and all of a sudden he caught fire, made the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so, like we said, making the playoffs, not anything could happen after that.
Well, between you and his dad, I mean, you guys are taking all the wins up in the league, but I'm coming for you. I'm hitting my stride.
Come on.
Chasers are hitting their stride right now. All right.
As a matter of fact, Chase, I think it's me and you this week coming up.
Yeah, it will be next week. So I may not be talking as much smack here now coming next Sunday.
Well,
but
we'll
definitely
see
have to. We will give everybody the update on the live
That's
update
right.
on what the situation is next Sunday morning as Kevin and I face off in the fantasy baseball league here for the Sports Stove.
So
That's
there's
gonna do
something
it
to
for us
look
this
forward
week.
to right there alone.
As we said before, we hope everybody has a very safe and very happy
That's right. Yeah, be
Memorial Day
safe
holiday
and
weekend.
remember why we have a 3-day weekend.
Very much so. All right. So for Kevin Wilson, for me, Chase Thorne, and for everybody here at Belly Up Fantasy Sports, bellyupsports.com, we're going to say Slanjava. See us next week. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you again.
See you.